Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are live on Adopt for Life's public Facebook page. Thanks so much for joining us for this week's Snack and Chat, our weekly segment where we explore topics that are top of mind for families formed by adoption, kinship, and customary care. My name is Chantal, Community Engagement Liaison with Adopt for Life. Our host is Catherine Connors, and today our guest is Sherry Caldwell of the Ontario Disability Coalition. For those of you that are watching us live, thank you for being with us. Feel free to ask your questions. Just put them in the chat below, and we'll do our best to answer those questions. And Sherry will do her best to answer those questions. I will just take a brief moment just to remind you that because this is on our public Facebook page, that you do want to be mindful of what information that you're putting in your question or in your comments, since it will be publicly available. So not identifying information, things like that you don't want just out there in the World Wide Web. So with that in mind, we do want to hear from you. So let us know that you're watching. If you have a question for Sherry, put it in the chat, and we'll look forward to hearing from you. Before I pass it off to Catherine, I just want to take another moment just to introduce Sherry for those that are maybe not familiar with the work that she does. So Sherry is a change maker. She is a wife and mother to 4 children. Her 16-year-old daughter, Ashley, has a rare disorder. She is on a mission to put an end to discrimination in public policy in Ontario based on age and disability. She co-founded the Ontario Disability Coalition, a grassroots advocacy group of parents, caregivers, and disabled individuals. Board member for Family Alliance Ontario, as well as Easter Seals on the Special Education Advisory Board representative for YRDSB, past chair of the Family Engagement Committee for Children Treatment Network of Simcoe, New York. So thank you so much, Sherry, for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And I know there's already so many questions, so I don't want to take up any more time. I'm just going to pass it right off to Catherine.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And I know that you may need to go on mute at any given moment, so just feel free to give us a heads up. Also on my end, our children are home, so I have my son beside me at the moment, so that's awesome. But we're going to go in and jump in and ask these questions. This is a really big topic for a lot of families of ours, and it's something that it can be a really scary topic to talk about, and it's an overwhelming thing to try and advocate for our child, and we just really appreciate you coming. So if you're okay, Sherry, we're just going to jump into the questions, and if you need to step away for a second, I'm more than happy to maybe share my experiences as well. We all know I enjoy talking, so there's no hesitation there on my end. So Chantal briefly mentioned that you are a part of not a part, but you are actually co-founder of the Ontario Disability Coalition. So I'd love to know, like, how did this actually come to be, and what are the current advocacy efforts that the coalition is doing?
Sure. So the Ontario Disability Coalition was founded in 2017, so it's 4 years already, and it was founded because when the Ontario Autism Program was launched, which was actually quite an incredible program, direct funding therapy for children on the autism spectrum disorder. Families of children that had cerebral palsy, FASD, rare and undiagnosed, were kind of at a shock that our children were left out, and we felt discriminated against because therapies such as physiotherapy, speech, and OT is unaffordable for the average family. And we wanted to bring our voices to Queen's Park, basically, and we felt that there wasn't a voice for other disabilities. So that's kind of where it started, and we've grown from there.
And I know you guys have, I personally am a part of your Facebook groups, and it's just amazing to see how many families now utilize this group to help gain support and to learn of their rights. And I feel like that, you know, it really does take a couple of parents who have that lived experience to actually try and step up. And I think that's why the autism community has done so well, is because they have a big voice, and it's fantastic. They're getting much needed therapy and supports. And I think it's amazing to see other families also trying to start ringing those bells to get the same amount of support as well. So it's fantastic. We're also going to be putting the links into this. So if you want to be a part of the Ontario Disability Coalition, I know that Chantal will be posting a whole bunch of links. Sherry provided us with some amazing resources that we'll make sure get put in the comments as well. You know, when we're thinking about, you know, advocating for our child or for our children with disabilities, it's a pretty scary term, as I had kind of alluded to ahead of, you know, before we got into these questions. So I'd love if you can kind of explain what it actually means to be an advocate, and what are some ways, you know, how can someone become an advocate for their child, or any sort of tips, that kind of thing that you have.
Yeah, sure. Like, advocating is to speak up for someone or plead a case for someone else and for another. And that's something that we have to do frequently. I mean, we do for all our children, but when you have a child with disabilities, we run into barriers and gatekeepers. It seems almost at every turn, through multiple systems. So it's daunting, but it's just so necessary for our kids. Some of them can learn to be advocates for themselves, and others like they need someone to back them up and be their microphone.
Yeah. It's so true. And I think that, you know, when I first became a parent and I realized that I needed to advocate and I would need to begin to advocate for my child, it is overwhelming, and can be very, and we've talked about this when we were almost like planning for this, it can be so scary thinking about that we will have to fight for this, and going into meetings and seeing, you know, 10, 15 people around the table. And it's completely overwhelming to know that sometimes you have to be put in positions where you're going to have to speak up. And I appreciate that it's scary, and especially for our awaiting families who maybe are open to adopting a child with a disability of any kind, is just to know that it's okay to also be kind of scared of the process, and you learn skills, and you learn what works and what doesn't. And I think that's the amazing thing about advocacy, is that there's someone else who's gone through it who can kind of help you as well. So I know we'll talk about some supports that we both have personally accessed and what we know of that other people have accessed, but just to know that it's okay to feel overwhelmed, in that advocacy, yes, can be really big. It could be schools, it could be treatment centers, it could be access to specific funding, but advocacy for me is also almost like every day, like the social skills and advocating for, you know, accessible parks. So I think the definition itself could vary, and it depends on the needs of your child too. Would you say that that's kind of a fair interpretation?
Yeah, and I hope that parents, maybe we'll try to empower them with some tips to make it a little bit easier, and you start slowly in this journey. I know I did. When you went to the first few barriers at the school level, or even with the LIN at the very beginning, like the wait list for early intervention therapy existed way back in the day, and I think they're worse now. So we'll try to give them a few tips that can make it a bit easier, because no one's in this alone. One thing I tried to do as a young parent on the journey was to get involved with my treatment center and to learn from parents kind of ahead of you on the journey. And I'm still trying to do that today because Ashley's 16 and now I'm on like a board with parents that have adults with developmental disabilities, and there's so many things to learn. Like it's an ongoing journey.
It totally is. How do you feel? Do you want to skip ahead and maybe we can, if you don't mind sharing those tips since we're talking about that? Because I know that you had prepared
sure.
a few strategies or tips that worked for you.
Well, I would say if you're running into a barrier, like maybe you're trying to get more EA support at school, or you're trying to access therapy and someone is telling you no, it's like it could be a teacher, it could be a therapist. The first trick to try is to always ask them to put that reason in writing. And sometimes they'll do that, or they'll already send you an email, but if they won't, you can document it for yourself and just write up the minutes of the phone call or the meeting and send it off to them to confirm. I just want to document, you said we can't access this for this reason. And also sometimes it's important to ask them why your child doesn't qualify. That can be a bit telling. That would be the first thing. The second tip is when you are sending that note to confirm that they said no, always copy someone on it. It could be just your mom. They won't necessarily know it's grandma or a neighbor or friend, but it keeps and to bring that, if you're going to have a meeting at school, to bring someone with you. It keeps them more honest to have someone there. And if there are someone that's maybe not a strong advocate, you can have them just take notes for you.
I've done that a few times with even my friends. I'm like, in this way, they're always.
And you don't have to introduce them as your neighbor or your grandma. You can say, this is Anne, she's on Ashley's team. It could be as easy as that. And they take you more seriously and they're more careful with what they say. So I find that is beneficial. And I don't think that. I can remember showing up and there's all these people in the room and I didn't know to bring someone.
Yeah. And it's so overwhelming. Like we had talked about before, you walk into this room and you feel like you don't have a voice, or you feel like you have to agree with something. And I know I've been in meetings even for, my eldest daughter, and just to have someone out there and be like, hold on a second, can I just confirm this is what? Whereas for you can be, it's especially when you're starting, it can be pretty nerve-wracking to know that you're going into these meetings and you don't agree with the supports that are there.
And it's important to, the second tip would be, it's important to know your child's rights. So your child has educational rights. They have a right to be at school from 9 to 3, the typical school day. They have a right to attend their home school. Sometimes you by notifying the school board or the LIN or whoever you're dealing with, that you are aware of your rights, moves things forward. Or asking them to put it in writing, like, oh, I can't have access to any of it, or my child can attend the trip because there isn't someone to support them on that field trip or something. By asking them to put that in writing, you might see the answer might change. It might get you to yes.
It's funny how that works sometimes.
Yes.
I think. Yeah. And I think that also not being afraid to actually write those emails. So actually one of the questions is, and maybe we can kind of ingrain that question, is like, I hear two things often from families is, one, they're worried about that confrontation. They don't want to write that email. Or the other side is that they feel like they have to be like mama or papa bear and be ferocious. So I'm wondering, do you have any tips around that about how actually to engage in that?
Yeah, no, I don't think you have to be ferocious. Sometimes it's just reinstating the facts. It seems like even with the school, they might have, the principal might be communicating they don't have enough resources to toilet your child in kindergarten. And so for you to, you can even tell them, listen, you know what, it sounds like you don't have the EA support here. So I feel like I'm going to reach out to the superintendent or the trustee and see if we can help get the resources that you need. So you can do it in a nice manner instead as kindly as you can. You really want to build relationships with your team. Also, a good thing to do is keep your team members, like maybe the teacher or a speech therapist, try to communicate with them regularly. If your child's making some small gains or regressing, send out an email every once in a while, maybe once a month, to check in. The squeaky wheel tends to win things, and if you can build that relationship in a positive way, when they're, you might be more likely to get what you're asking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a skill in itself. And I know that there's been times, and I'll be very honest, in my advocacy journey, I wasn't so collaborative and happy, and I was very reactive and not responsive. And I think that that's okay too. And if as parents we make the mistake, I've acknowledged it and said, you know what, I need to take a step back because I'm not in a good place, or I went back and apologized, but it still doesn't negate the advocacy that needs to be there. So if you are watching this and realizing maybe you were a bit too mama papa bear, it's always okay. Relationships still grow and develop, and sometimes I think that addressing it can be helpful as well.
It's so true. And sometimes you don't want to upset anyone with your advocacy. Some people are uncomfortable to do it, but sometimes nothing changes. I was told this when I was having a lot of issues at school, and I called the Ministry of Education for some advice. And I think I was being too nice. They weren't toileting Ashley one year. And she said to me, it's okay if you've upset the principal or something. Like, nothing will change if no one's upset. If there's no emotion in the room, it's just going to keep on going. In school, especially with schools, it's hard to get them to move that dial and get the support there.
Yeah.
So as uncomfortable as it might feel sometimes, it's just necessary.
I have cried many a times in IEP meetings and felt so embarrassed, but it's okay, because I mean, especially when it's our children, it's okay to show emotion, and it's okay, especially if confrontation is hard for you. I think that's why I think your suggestion of bringing that second person with you is really important, especially if you do have that hard time. And it doesn't mean the person needs to be the ferocious one to go out there, but even having, someone beside you to help regulate yourself and help. I always like to write down my points, like the top 3 things that I want to make sure that I say, because sometimes the emotion gets so high, it goes over my head. So
yeah, I would bring in, I used to prepare 1-pager with what I wanted to accomplish, why this was beneficial, how this would help Ashley, and bring it into the meeting if it was a really stressful meeting, so that if I was too emotional to talk, everything I wanted to say was on paper. As far as learning about your educational rights, Easter Seals has an excellent blog called Easter Seals Kids at School that I'd suggest parents access if they want to learn about IEPs, IPRCs, how to advocate through barriers in the school system, or transitions is a big topic on there. There's quite a wealth of information.
Awesome. And I'm pretty sure Chantel actually has a copy of that. She's nodding yes, so she'll post it in the comments below. And she's also engaging with anyone who's watching. So if you do have a question for Sherry or for myself, or in general about advocating, feel free to comment. Or if you agree with anything that's being said, or if you have tips or suggestions as parents, feel free to comment, because we love to hear from you guys as well. When we're talking about this advocacy that we have to do, and a lot of times there are children, youth, and adults that parents and caregivers will have to advocate for and with for the rest of their lives, but there also, I think, are opportunities where we can support children and youth to become self-advocates. So I'm wondering, if you can talk a little bit about how do we help our children with those self-advocacy skills.
Yeah, that is important. I think it's really key to include your child in these meetings whenever possible. I would have Ashley come and attend her IPRC and our team meetings that we would have. She's communication is hard for her, but she would still be there and be in the room. And some kids, if your child is verbal, it's really important to have them there and to give them opportunities to speak and to be heard, so that they also can be encouraged to advocate for themselves when you're not around and when they're on their own.
Yeah,
Their voice is actually very powerful.
It is. And even like my son is young, he's 9. But again, he goes to all of his meetings, all the meetings that I go to, and even things like medication changes. I listen, I ask him, how does that make you feel? What do you want to do? And although a 9-year-old can't make full decisions, or, his decision would be to play video games, he still is in there. And even with IEP meetings, although he doesn't have the attention span to stay for an entire IPRC meeting, I still ask him to come for the first little bit to talk about what's important. I ask him ahead of time because he prefers that, and I write a list of what's important for him. Once we get the IEP back, or even it's like a therapeutic plan, we go through it each together and say, what do you like, what don't you like, and why? So even with a lot of like his sensory and OT, occupational therapy needs, we go through it together and like, here are the recommendations. And sometimes he'll be saying yes, sometimes he'll say no. A lot of times he doesn't want to look different from other students. And so he doesn't want noise canceling headphones. And he was very big on saying that. So we came up with a few alternatives of what might work instead to kind of, so for music class, he's called out to be the helper in another classroom where really, yes, it's too loud for him, but also he gets to be the cool kid who gets to leave class. So I think slowly it's getting there, and it's not going to be perfect. And then for my daughter who has more significant needs, who's nonverbal, I think what we like to do, she does not like attending any meetings. She's made that very clear to us, but we have like the 1-pager about her, so that whenever we have meetings, we'll put her picture, and we have a 1-pager about her likes, her dislikes, who she is, so that we can always kind of go back to that. It's not just a clinical meeting. This is a meeting about a really amazing child. So those are kind of the tips that we've gone to.
That's awesome. I used to actually make a short video of some clips of Ashley's progress in therapy, just to show the whole team, because we'd have big meetings with speech, OT, PT, and school. And although that could be time consuming, but it was, it was really well received too.
Yeah. And we did it even the beginning of the school year. And it wasn't even I think near the end, I had to revise it. It was like a 15-page all about me book.
Oh, yes.
Any new worker, any new person who was coming, who's a part of her team, got this copy, and they got to see like, this is what works, this is what doesn't, this is, and I mean, I'm sure you agree with it. Not being able to speak is not the same as not having nothing to say, as not having anything to say. So it's like, this is what she means, this is what this means. And I think that it's been helpful, and it helps, we put the preventative things in place, and we do the preliminary advocacy, so that hopefully, it sets the foundation for the next things, and you won't have to feel like we have to advocate so hard, although that's never actually always the case. We try. We try. So we did have a question come in from one of our awaiting parents, and I'd love to hear your advice or perspective on this. So the person wrote in and said they're a newly adoptive parent to a child with complex disabilities, and I am very overwhelmed when it comes to advocating for specialized equipment for their child. Do you have any advice?
Okay, specialized equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is hard. There is limited supports available, but definitely meeting with your child's treatment center and see if you can access equipment. Usually your OT or PT can help you with ADP funding and provincially funded equipment, but also sometimes leave you with that 25% charge that parents have to pay. So there's Easter Seals will fund $3,000 a year per family. And there's also some equipment just doesn't have funding. It's not ADP, like even things like bath chairs or toileting, which you think are, everyone needs to use the bath. But you can always look to like Lions Club, Rotary clubs, maybe for some funding. There's the Needy for the Degree if you want to get secondhand. There's Zach's List, which is a Facebook page, I think. Is it a website? I'm not sure if it's a website too.
I used to be a website. I think they stopped recently. They're just on Facebook right now.
And those, they have used equipment. And I think the Needy for the Needy, not the Greedy is in Niagara. And I think it's free, or you can leave a donation for pediatric equipment.
Yeah, and it's honestly, it's like a huge warehouse. Like if you go in there, it's basically a giant warehouse for different adaptive equipment. So they have things from wheelchairs to bath seats, but they have bicycles and standers, and like it's like Christmas Day for the for many of us.
But I've seen the pictures. It looks like there's a lot of things, and even don't be shy to if you join, there's lots of parent groups for that you can join, support groups, and you can ask, maybe somebody has something that their child outgrown and they might be willing to donate in your area. Or even if you have to start a GoFundMe, which I think some families aren't comfortable with, but our children's needs are important, and some of these things are incredibly expensive. So
absolutely. And I think also just to acknowledge that feeling overwhelmed with all of this is normal, that we all are feeling overwhelmed. And this is why organizations like the Ontario Disability Coalition exist, and other group, we yourself and I, we've been a part of a group called PAL, which is the Parent Advocacy Link. And it's just a wealth of knowledge of people from all walks of life. And I know depending on your child's specific diagnoses, like there's supports for specific groups as well. So just even able to post in a forum of people who get it, saying, I don't even know what to ask for sometimes, or it's, I'm being told no, or, I've been told this equipment is going to be great, but it's not covered, or whatever the situation is. It's just good to, one, get the validation to know that everyone feels it. We get it, but there's little tips like around, like For the Needy, Not the Greedy, and Zach's List. And sometimes families just do like swaps, like this is too big, so I think it's fantastic to see the strength of communities come together to support each other.
And I think you're right about joining the groups. So if you can join a group like PAL, or in Ottawa, there's a group called One More Thing for children that have medically complex and physical disabilities. But in these groups, you can learn about things that are available that could help, be it therapy or be it equipment. Because if you don't know about something, you don't know to ask, like especially around augmentative communication. I found there were quite a few different tools that I learned about from other parents, or I attended before COVID, you could go places. I went to home in Bloorview and they had an augmentative communication open house, and they had all these different tools and things. And then I came back and asked for a special communication book. And my daughter's team in York region, augmented team, made it for her. But if you don't know about something, you can't ask for it, or specialized camps, treatments. So it's really helpful to connect with other parents. And online is good, but not everyone wants to go online. Although I guess because these parents are on Facebook watching this now, they probably are online. But sometimes you want to connect with the parents in your own community. That's very valuable too. And I would recommend meeting the parents at your child's school, like right there in your neighborhood. They can be really, really rich resources. So as you're waiting in the office for your IPRC meeting, if we're ever back to school and we have, sounds strange to start during COVID, because I don't know, this fall, are we going to be sitting in the office waiting for our IPRC? Is it going to be in person?
Yes, I'm putting it out there.
I met with the other parents in my neighborhood, and it was a really rich resource because we kind of were dealing with the same principles and certs, and we came together with our kids once a month, and we had pizza parties monthly, and we did this for like 10 years, and the kids had various diagnoses, but it was so supportive. And sometimes you just need that support person in your neighborhood when your child's really complex. You can't you can't predict when you're going to have some sort of, you need to call someone up, and these people are going to be there for you. I'd really encourage that real life connection whenever possible.
And I know even like smaller programs like $1 Million Smiles. And so they're a program that builds like not specialized, but playgrounds for children who have life limiting or significant complex physical disabilities. And in my neighborhood alone, we were referred to it. And because of our relationships, my next door neighbor and their family, and then there's a neighbor down the street. And so they came and they built like little backyard playgrounds for like 3 families, because we all knew each other. And so even with something like the Starlight Foundation is another fantastic. So sometimes it's about knowing people who to ask for, and yes, it's great to be able to be fierce and support your child and be able to continuously do it, because it's tiring. Which is segueing into our question. Next question is around the self-care piece. So as parents, and self-care is such a complex word for families, and when you're dealing with people and we're burning out and then we're told to take an Epsom salt bath, like not helpful. But I'm wondering if you have tips, like how do you manage self-care? And I mean, you're doing this personally and professionally, so I'm wondering if you have tips for other families of how to manage that self-care.
Yeah, I mean, that's hard, right? I mean, for me, advocating is kind of a bit of it helps me to network with other parents that really get it. So yes. Having those friends to connect with, where you can exchange the story and you don't going to feel judged by it, is really helpful. I started to volunteer, and I volunteered with Easter Seals and with my daughter's treatment center, and that was a way of just doing something with other adults and helping my child at the same time. I mean, that's not for everyone, but I found it was really helpful and steering me to be a strong advocate for Ashley. But yeah, just carve out time for yourself, which is so hard. I hate to be the one saying that, because it's just not possible, Yeah,
I think it looks different for each person. And I know for me, especially during COVID, like the only thing that kind of really got me through it is that, like you had mentioned, that connection with other people, going onto Facebook or whatever it is, or texting a friend and saying like, how can we do this? How are you managing? I'm not managing okay, or I'm feeling overwhelmed. And like, you post on some of these groups, and even with our private Adopt for Life community, like you can post and say like, I'm feeling completely overwhelmed. And sometimes just even getting validated can do wonders. And to have someone say, oh, you're strong, or people like say things that they're trying to help support you, but really you just want a space to be able to be vulnerable and put it out there and feel that it's okay to not be okay. And I think for myself, that has been the number one thing. And yes, I go to Netflix and whatever, yeah. But I mean, it's only so far without little ones coming to jump on your bed and such. But yeah, I think that finding what works for you and just giving voice to your feelings has been the most helpful for me. We have 10 minutes left. Okay. So I just want to be mindful for that. We do have questions left, but maybe what I'll do, Sherry, if you're okay, I'm going to ask one more question. Okay. And then I'd like to kind of flip it over to you to make sure if there's anything that you want to share, or if you think we've missed something, or if you want to ask us a question. So we'll switch the tables just a little bit. So I just wanted to very quickly talk about, for families who just received a new diagnosis and accessing support. Do you have any simple advice for families who may have just gotten that paper or just gotten that phone call with a diagnosis, and what do you think their next steps or first steps should be?
Oh yeah, that like just a diagnosis doesn't change your child, right? Your child is your child before the diagnosis or after. It's hard. Sometimes you feel like you're grieving the child, it can be really, really hard, but in time, sometimes it gets a little easier on the journey, but definitely the connections are so rich, and try to find those real life connections in your neighborhood or with your family, and don't be afraid to ask for help. And sometimes it's hard, you want to do everything for your child, but it takes a team for sure, a village, and build those connections with even the professionals in your life. Sometimes, like my daughter's physiotherapist, when she was younger, I would go there for therapy, and I could just tell her stories. She would tell me stories of other kids that had started walking, and like it was like my daughter was getting physical therapy and I was just getting therapy, just talking to her, like build up those connections. And then she was someone that I could call on when my daughter wasn't allowed out of her wheelchair, at school. She came to the school with me, and talk, make connections and talk to people, talk it through. It's hard.
I agree. It's hard. I know that, there's no shame in getting support yourself as well. So if you need counseling or you need something for yourself, I think that it's okay. It's okay to take a while to have everything solidify in your brain, because it can be a shock for a lot of families.
Yeah, I remember being when my daughter was 2, like she was born and in the NICU for 4 months, and then back in and out of the hospital all the first year. And I think I had a lot of denial. I thought she was going to outgrow it, and she would get off the oxygen. She was on oxygen and the works. And then at 2, I think it kind of sunk in, like, maybe she's not going to outgrow this. Like I can remember on her 2nd birthday, but it's all, allow yourself those time, and those feelings are okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's same thing. It took me, I had these grand, Serenity moved home when she was 3.5. And I was like, oh no, she'll be walking by again. I'm a social worker. And then 2 years walked by. I'm like, oh, okay. Reality sinks in. And then all these amazing milestones happen, and they happen differently, and that's okay. And then you grieve a little bit, and then you're amazed again. I don't know if you know, Sherry, this poem, maybe I can try and find it. It's called Welcome to Holland.
Yes.
Did you ever read? I remember reading it, and one of my best friends gave birth to a child with disabilities, and I remember giving her a link to this poem, and she's like, this is exactly how I feel. So for that family who maybe newly to getting the diagnosis, I'll see if I can find a link to that poem, because I think it kind of helps summarize just how intense and how shocking and grieving, but how beautiful life is. Okay, we have 5 minutes. So Sherry, is there anything you think that we missed, or any tips or resources that you would like to share before I hand things over to Chantal?
Sure. I mean, the Ontario Disability Coalition really was formed to be about political advocacy and a political voice. And I know that's definitely not for everyone, but just to put it out there for any parents that really feel motivated, that it is also important to reach out to your MPPs and let them know about our experiences and the the barriers that we're running into. And if you ever feel up to it, maybe you can put this in your back of your mind for some time in the future. But if we don't let them know our stories and the barriers and the issues we're running, nothing will ever change. And the stories that we share can make things happen. And that's sort of what we've been about, getting our voices heard and pushing for more justice for people living with disabilities. So that, I mean, that certainly isn't for everyone, but anyone that feels motivated and wants to get involved, they could email us or read our blog and read some of the stories we're sharing. And if they do feel motivated, we'd encourage you to reach out to your MPPs and let them know.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. And even encouraging everyone to join your Facebook page, because even if you aren't a politically motivated person, there's a wealth of information on those groups, and you might actually feel encouraged and inspired to do more as well. So I'd like to encourage anyone watching on replay or live to join the Ontario Disability Coalition. And it's important to get our voices out there and to share and to learn. So I appreciate you coming. And is there anything else?
No, I mean, I'm also a board member for Family Alliance Ontario, and I didn't really share anything about them, but they do advocacy for people with developmental disabilities to be included in a normal, everyday life, living a good life in the community. And they have family networks across Ontario. So if you're struggling and you want to meet some people in person and maybe the school isn't the right place for you, if you visit their website, you can find networks across Ontario, north, south, east, west, and meet some people. They also have some amazing Facebook knowledge shares too, with very excellent advocacy and tips. So maybe to let them know about that, but I think we've shared a million resources now. It may have overwhelmed people. That's just what I was worried about. I don't want to share too much.
So we always like to do, and I'm pretty sure most of our snack and chats could be full webinars. And I'm pretty sure Chantal is putting those links in below. So if you're watching, you can just scroll down to our comment section and click those amazing resources. And Shara, I just want to thank you so much for coming on and for being with us and sharing, and we appreciate it. Also, wishing you a happy birthday from all of us. I know you didn't want me to, but I couldn't not. So we hope you have a great day, Chantal. I will flip it back to you because I know that we have an amazing webinar tonight. So if you want to share more about that, but we really do sincerely appreciate everything that you're doing for our community.
Yeah, I'll just echo what Catherine said. Thank you so much, Sherry, for taking time. I know you always have a lot on your plate, so thanks for being with us. And you know, a lot of comments already from our community just thanking you for being you and you know, creating the Ontario Disability Coalition. Like Catherine said, I did put all those links, so there's no rush. Just go through them one at a time and find all those amazing resources that are available to you. Even if you're watching this on replay, you can still ask your question, and we can always do our best to find the answers for you, or if you can't find them in those posted. What else? Oh yes, tonight, 7 p.m. Kim Barthel, it's part 4, the last part of becoming a behavioral detective. So come and join us tonight. It might be the last part. If you didn't attend 1, 2, or 3, it does not matter. It does not matter at all. You can watch those at a later time. Just please join us, and you'll find out why you don't want to miss it.
She's awesome. Like every time I see her, I'm like,
yeah. So just come and join the conversation. You won't regret it. And other than that, I think we still have one more snack and chat before we go on holiday in August. So please join us next week with the Never Too Late program. We're going to have a great discussion next week. So happy birthday again, Sherry. Thanks so much for taking time out of your special birthday to be here. I feel kind of honored. We really appreciate it. Our community did too. And we'll just say bye for now.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.